There's a moment that almost every songwriter knows all too well. It usually happens late at night when the world is super quiet and you're just sitting alone with this half-finished song that refuses to come alive for some reason. And you play it again and you hope like this time the spark is going to show up. But instead, the room just stays still and there's no goosebumps and no shift in the air like you want. And it's just you and this melody that feels kind of like something's missing and you can't really put a name on it. And in that silence, a thought creeps in. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, just kind of a quiet truth that sits in your chest, right? And maybe other people know something that you don't. Well, here's the part that feels strange once you understand it. Your songs aren't falling flat because you lack talent. Actually, nothing like that. They're actually falling flat because your brain and your listener's brain are still running like on a survival system that's older than civilization itself. It's a system that's built for predators in the grass and food that's miles away, and it's a system that decides instantly whether the sound is worth caring about or not. And music didn't create this system, by the way, it just totally hijacked it. So today, I want to show you 7 psychological triggers that make songs feel addictive. And they're not tricks, they're not shortcuts, they're actually the ancient rules that your brain still follows, even when you're wearing headphones, instead of carrying a spear. And once you understand these, then you're going to hear music differently and you're going to write music differently too. So let's begin. All right, let's talk for a minute about the song Thunderstruck by AC/DC. You've heard it. Angus Young's guitar riff starts kind of sparse and urgent, and then the full band is layering behind it perfectly. And then they're building this relentless tension until this thunderous chorus and rhythm section crash in. And I mean, stadiums just lose their marbles when they hear it every single time. It's like the perfect long build payoff. So let's go way back and pretend that you're a caveman living maybe 100,000 years ago in the African savannah. And, food is scarce, water holes are dried up, predators are hiding in the tall grass. One morning you spot trees off in the distance with really ripe fruit, but they're miles away across hot, dangerous ground. And your brain doesn't just say, that looks good. It actually lights up this almost irresistible fire inside of you. And a chemical spark called dopamine surges as you imagine the sweet taste and the full belly. And that spark pushes you to stand up, grab your spear, and start walking, even though the reward isn't even close yet. The anticipation keeps your legs moving when you're tired, and it keeps your eyes sharp for danger, and it keeps your hope alive, actually. But finally, you reach the trees and you bite into that juicy fruit, and the payoff hits instantly and another wave of dopamine floods in and it's like, yes, this was worth it. And you remember exactly how you got here, right? In your brain. And your brain tags the whole journey, like the long walk, the careful path. It's like a winning strategy. And that double hit, excitement on the way, satisfaction at the end, that's why dopamine evolved and it turned lazy animals into persistent hunters and explorers and survivors. And without it, early humans would have given up too easily and never made it through tough times, Dopamine made the chase feel good, and that way we'd keep chasing the things that kept us alive, like food and water and shelter and mates and knowledge. Now fast forward to today, and your brain still runs that same ancient wiring and it did all those hundreds of thousands of years ago. When a song like Thunderstruck starts with that sparse, urgent guitar riff, your brain senses like something big is coming, and dopamine kicks in during that buildup, and it just brings back the caveman feeling and the pull toward those distant fruit trees that I was talking about. The tension rises and your pulse quickens and you're hooked, and then that full band crashes in and that thunderous chorus and the payoff arrives and another dopamine rush hits right there. And it says like, that was awesome, do it again. And the song tricks your brain into replaying the exact same survival style loop. It's the same story that your ancestors lived every single day. It's just with guitars now instead of fruit trees. And music hijacks this ancient system because your brain can't tell the difference between a real survival win and a perfectly timed musical one. And that's why the build and release in rock songs feels so powerful. It's evolution's old motivation engine, like still running strong in your head. You can also think of it kind of like a fireworks fuse and explosion if you want to. Lighting the fuse creates the building tension and excitement, which is like dopamine starting to flow as you wait. And then it finally bursts into color and sound and the full reward hits, The waiting actually makes the explosion feel even more satisfying. And now you understand the first hack, which is Dopamine Engineering through Anticipation and Release. Okay, it's a scary, nerdy name. It sounds totally scientific, but the meaning is super simple. Now let's talk about the song Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes from back in 2003. That iconic riff just repeats immediately and relentlessly with almost no variation whatsoever. It turns it into one of the most inescapable modern rock earworms ever. And so picture a young explorer. I'm going to call her Maya, and she's stepping into like a dense, misty jungle for the very first time. And the canopy blocks most of the sunlight, and every vine looks like it could be a snake, right? Every rustle in the leaves could be danger, and her heart races. Her eyes dart everywhere, and she moves slowly, tense, ready to run and bolt at any second. And the jungle feels like threatening because everything is unknown. And the next day, she takes the exact same trail. She sees the same twisted vine once again, and the same patch of bright red flowers, and the same low-hanging branch that she had to duck under. And this time, her shoulders drop just a little bit. And she's like, oh yeah, I remember that vine. It didn't try to eat me yesterday. And then by the fifth time walking that same path, something magical starts happening. Maya is no longer scanning for threats every second, and she starts noticing how the beautiful light filters through the leaves in the trees, and she hums softly as she walks even, right? That same jungle that once felt super scary and threatening now feels more comfortable and welcoming, and she even smiles when she sees that crooked tree that she used to fear. And nothing in the jungle changed. Actually, what changed was her brain's quiet signal, which is, I know this place and it's safe, I can relax here. And that's the power of familiarity. Your brain evolved this preference because for most of human history, the unknown carried super real risk. I mean, new plants could be poisonous, and new sounds might mean that there's predators nearby. New faces could be enemies, and every time you safely encountered something again and again and again without anything bad happening, well then your brain learned to kind of lower its guard and tag it as good and safe. And it rewarded you with this subtle feeling of ease and pleasure so that you'd keep returning to what proved to be reliable. And now, you can bring that same ancient wiring into a modern rock song. When you first hear that massive riff in Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes, it feels a little bit new and a little bit raw, and your brain's still like assessing it. But after the riff just repeats and repeats a few times, especially those immediate kind of contiguous repeats, your brain just goes, I know this one. It's safe and I like it. And the more it repeats, the more effortless it feels for your brain to process it. Soon, you're nodding your head, you're tapping your foot, and the song feels good because it's just become familiar territory at that point. I'm going to say it's just like the feeling of wearing a new pair of jeans. At first they're kind of stiff and awkward and uncomfortable, but the more you wear them, you break them in, the softer and more comfortable that they get. And your brain starts to like them simply because they're now familiar and they're easy. And now you know the second hack, which is strategic repetition, or I'm just going to call it the mere exposure effect. And again, the name feels kind of complex, but the meaning is super easy to understand. My third hack is called prediction reward, or I'm just going to call it guessing correctly, right? Smells Like Teen Spirit by that band Nirvana. It's a striking example of this. The quiet verse and then the loud chorus dynamic is so tightly patterned that listeners accurately predict and anticipate that explosive chorus every single time. I mean, can you hear the song going through your mind right now? I'm sure you can. Now, imagine that you're a little kid standing in the backyard on a Sunday afternoon and you're trying to master a new basketball shot. I'm talking about like the perfect free throw, right? And at first, every attempt is a total mess. The ball flies too short, too long. It just clangs off the rim. Your brain is guessing wildly and it goes, if I release this angle, will it go in? And most of the time the answer is no and you feel frustrated, but after hundreds of tries, it starts to click and you bend your knees just right, you extend your arm just right, and you release the ball with just the right touch. And as the ball leaves your hand, your brain predicts the arc and the spin and the exact path toward the hoop. When it swishes through the net with that clean swoosh sound exactly like you imagined it, you're going to feel this bright little spark of satisfaction every single time. You're going to go, yes, I got it. And you try again, of course. It's another perfect release and then another clean swish. And each time your brain correctly predicts the outcome, that same satisfying spark returns to you. And it feels good. And you start smiling, you get confident, you shoot faster, you take bolder shots. The quiet dopamine reward from being right keeps pulling you back to the hoop, By the end of the afternoon, you're sinking shot after shot. You're feeling confident, you're in the flow. nothing dramatic happened. It's no crowd is cheering and there's no trophy or anything, but your brain just kept giving you those small little like, I was right hits, and that made the whole experience totally addictive. Why does your brain care so much about being right? Well, think about it. I mean, for millions of years, accurate predictions were essential for us surviving, Correctly guessing, like, if I aim this spear the right way, the animal's going to fall. Or if I step on this rock, it won't slip. And that could mean the difference between eating or not eating, or getting hurt or not getting hurt. And evolution wired your brain to release a little burst of pleasure, which is dopamine, whenever your predictions matched the reality. It's the brain's way of saying, good job, your understanding of the world is accurate and you should keep trusting it. And you're better at surviving because of this. Now, watch how that same system lights up when you listen to rock music. In Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, your brain quickly learns that quiet verse to loud chorus pattern. And as the soft part builds, it predicts like the explosion is coming right now. And when the guitars and drums crash in exactly like you expected, you feel that clean, I got it right spark. And there's no big surprise needed, just the satisfying reward of accurate prediction every time. Your brain isn't just listening to the song, it's actively playing a game that it loves winning. And music gives it an easy, repeatable way to keep scoring those quiet victories over and over again. I mean, your brain loves guessing games and it's constantly predicting what's going to happen next based on the patterns that it's learned. And when a song follows an expected pattern, like a riff or chorus landing right where you think it's going to, well, your brain gets a dopamine boost from being correct, and it rewards accurate guessing like it was a nicer surprise than your brain expected it to be. Music neuroscience actually shows this activates reward areas, and it makes listening feel satisfying and motivating, so you keep going for more wins. It's like solving a puzzle correctly and feeling smart. Here's another song that everyone knows, Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses. The famous opening riff and verse follow these comforting, predictable blues rock contours and patterns, but Slash slips in these surprising bends and wide intervals and rhythmic twists that keep it fresh and engaging. Okay, I want you to imagine a guy, I'm going to call him Mike, a 52-year-old diesel mechanic who grew up blasting Guns N' Roses and AC/DC in his buddy's Camaro back in 1987. And after a long, greasy day at the shop, crawling under trucks and torquing bolts and dealing with surprise breakdowns and impatient customers, Mike comes home, he cracks open a cold one, he sinks into his recliner and he fires up his old stereo and starts scrolling through a playlist, First he tries like a chill lo-fi beat station and it's smooth and harmless, but after a couple of minutes, he's like already bored, His mind drifts to tomorrow's job list and the music is just too predictable and too background and it feels like elevator music, There's no spark. He zones out completely and next he puts on some like experimental prog metal that a buddy recommended, probably me. It's full of crazy time changes and screeching guitars and random sound effects, and within maybe 90 seconds, his brow furrows and he's just like mentally drained trying to follow what the hell's going on, and he's like, what is this noise, and he hits skip, of course, and it's too chaotic, Too much brain work after an already exhausting day. And then Mike cues up Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses. The moment that iconic opening riff hits, his foot starts tapping on the footrest, and the verse has that comfortable, familiar blues rock groove, and he's known it ever since high school, and it feels like slipping into an old pair of work boots. But then Slash unleashes those surprising soulful bends and the big melodic lift in that solo, and it still catches him off guard in the best way. The chorus hits with just enough emotional punch to feel exciting, but it's not overwhelming him. By the time the song fades out, he's smiling and nodding his head and instinctively reaches for the replay button. And for the first time all day, he's like properly unwind. He's energized, but not drained. And nothing in the room changed. The difference was just the perfect balance, right? Enough predictability in the music to feel safe and comforting after a hard day, but enough surprise and flair to keep his brain happily engaged. And that's the top of this inverted U-curve, the sweet spot where most adults get the most pleasure from music. Here's what I mean. Psychologists found that most people enjoy things at a medium level of complexity. So think of this inverted U, where too simple is boring, too chaotic is confusing, and in music, familiar patterns give your brain comfort and let it predict easily, while small surprises like an unexpected note or a rhythm shift create just enough uncertainty that it keeps it interesting. If a song is too predictable, it gets boring, like the same old story. And if it's too wild and random, well, it feels confusing at that point. The most popular songs, they mix like I Know It's Coming with fun little surprises, kind of like a game that's challenging, but not impossible. Your brain actually loves that balance and it just stays excited. Brain studies show that this sweet spot reduces uncertainty in a rewarding way without overwhelming you. And it boosts pleasure and attention, actually. It's like a recipe with a secret twist, You follow a familiar favorite recipe with a predictable base, but then, as a chef, you add like one clever, unexpected ingredient or spice, and it still tastes like home, but the small surprise makes it way more interesting and way more memorable. Now, I have to say this here too. How much complexity is just right really depends on the person, On the average, a majority of people have a similar sweet spot, but some people love extremely complex music, and they enjoy the kind of music that drives ordinary people crazy. If you want to know why, well, there's two main reasons. First, personality, especially openness to experience. It's one of the big 5 traits if you're a Psych 101 nerd, right? People who score high on openness love novelty and new ideas and intellectual stimulation. And they treat complex music like a puzzle that they enjoy solving, And brain studies show that these people get more pleasure from intricate patterns and unexpected twists and sophisticated sounds. So think like jazz music or prog rock, classical, or even experimental stuff, Their reward system lights up more when the music is super challenging. Second of all, music expertise and repeated exposure also matter. Musicians and trained listeners have actually upgraded brains. Their auditory complex and working memory are better at processing complexity. So what feels overwhelming to a beginner at first, it feels just right to them. And repeated listening also lowers the subjective complexity of the song, and it starts to feel more familiar and manageable. And that moves the peak of their personal inverted U curve further to the right toward the higher complexity. I admit it, that was sort of complicated, but you can imagine like just right amount of spiciness in food, for example. For most people, medium spice tastes best, and too mild is boring. Too hot burns your mouth, but some people love super spicy food because their taste buds are a little bit different, or they've eaten spicy stuff a lot and just gotten used to it, Music works the same way. Most people like songs that are sort of a medium spicy. Not too simple, not too crazy, but if you have a personality that loves new and tricky things, or if you've listened to complicated music so much that your brain kind of got stronger at handling it, then really complex music feels just right or even exciting to you. And your brain doesn't get overwhelmed. It actually gets a bigger like, wow, this is awesome feeling instead. So does this describe you? I mean, it definitely describes me. And all of this describes my 4th hack, which is called balanced predictability and surprise. So a song can also be like pulling out an old photograph of a moment that you lived through, At first it's flat, it's silent, but as the music and narrative play on, the photo starts living in your memory and colors brighten and feelings flood right back. And it becomes a living scene that resonates in your own emotions. You don't just see the story, you actually feel it as if it's partly yours and creating that deep personal pull. And this is where I want to talk about the song Jeremy by the band Pearl Jam. I mean, it tells a raw, tragic story of a troubled kid and school violence through vivid lyrics. Eddie Vedder's intense delivery creates universal themes of isolation and pain, and that hits so deep and they feel personally meaningful. And this is the 5th hack, which is called emotional resonance and narrative. Now I want you to imagine Robert, who's a 58-year-old construction foreman, and he spent most of his life building highways and bridges, He's a big dude. He's quiet, he has calloused hands, and kind of a straightforward way of seeing the world, In one quiet Saturday afternoon, he's alone in his garage workshop, he's tinkering with an old truck engine, and the radio's playing in the background, a generic classic rock song comes on, and it's okay, but it really barely registers with him, And a few minutes later, he couldn't tell you a single thing about it. It's already gone. And then Pearl Jam's song Jeremy starts playing, and the raw guitar and Eddie Vedder's intense vocals hit Robert really hard for some reason. And the lyrics describe the quiet, troubled kid in the school, the one who feels totally invisible, and he carries heavy pain that no one notices, and eventually he reaches a breaking point. Robert suddenly pulled back to 1983 and he remembers this boy from his sophomore year in high school, not the song's character, but the real kid from his life who sat 2 rows behind him in homeroom, a skinny kid, always quiet, always wore the same flannel shirt almost every day. And, he never caused trouble. He never raised his hand, but you could tell that something just wasn't quite right at home. And Robert remembers how the kid would stare at his desk during class and he'd eat lunch alone, and how the teachers would try to call on him, but he'd only be silent. There were rumors about his family situation. Nobody really knew why. And then one day in the cafeteria, the kid totally lost it. He's yelling, crying, knocking trays off the table, and everyone froze, and a week later, he was gone, transferred or dropped out, and no one ever talked about what happened to him. As the song builds, Robert's wrench kind of slowly lowers to the workbench and his throat tightens up, and for the first time in 35 years, he feels that old mix of sadness and guilt and regret, and it kind of washes over him. The feeling of seeing a kid struggling right in front of him and not knowing what to say or do in the moment. He wishes he had at least tried to talk to him. That song isn't just telling a story, it's reaching back through time and making Robert confront a memory that he buried way long ago, Here's why this hits so deeply. When a song tells a powerful narrative, it stirs up real personal emotions connected with your own life experiences, and your brain, well, it treats it like something vitally important. It lights up an emotional center that stamps the music and the lyrics and the memories with a strong, this matters tag. The feelings act like emotional superglue, and it makes the song way more vivid and lasting in your mind than any neutral track really could ever be. A regular song is kind of like background noise at a busy construction site where you hear it, but it disappears the moment that the machinery starts again. And an emotionally resonant song is kind of like an old shoebox full of photos that falls off a shelf, and it spills out these pictures that you hadn't looked at in decades. It brings back faces and feelings and unfinished business that you thought were long forgotten. And you don't just glance and move on, you actually stay with it, You replay it because it finally gives voice to something that you carried alone for years. And that's why Robert ends up playing Jeremy on repeat for the next several days, Each listen lets him kind of safely revisit that kid from long ago and feel the regret and the compassion that he never really fully processed. And he could acknowledge the quiet guilt that he's carried since high school. The song doesn't just sound good. It finally puts words and music to this painful memory that he never quite dealt with. Okay, that was super heavy. I'm going to move on to a lighter hack, which I'm going to use the song Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple. You know it, that iconic 4-note guitar riff. It's the most famous, dun, 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 in rock, right? It hits right at the start, and it's within the first 2 to 4 seconds, and it repeats immediately, No intro build-up at all. It's just exposed, simple, and it hooks you instantly with its heavy, memorable contour. Modern audiences know it from countless covers and guitar tutorials and its cultural staying power. It's great for demonstrating how an ultra-simple, immediate riff creates this can't skip effect. And one thing that's for sure, modern attention spans are so short, People often decide in the first 8 to 15 seconds if they're even going to keep listening. So placing the catchiest part right in the start delivers immediate gratification, which grabs attention before the brain starts losing interest. It uses quick sensory processing to create fast reward signals and increases the chance that somebody's going to stick with the full song. Streaming data and attention studies confirm early hooks boost completion rates by giving the brain this instant, this is good signal. And that's why my 6th hack is called instant hook placement. Imagine this guy, a 55-year-old long-haul truck driver, and he's been hauling freight across the Midwest for years and years and years, and he knows every mile of Interstate 80 like the back of his hand, But the night runs are totally brutal. It's 2 a.m. He's already been behind the wheel for hours, and his eyes are burning, and his mind is starting to drift toward his house and his bills and the argument that he had with his daughter before he left home. And, to stay awake, he thumbs through a playlist and he hits play. And the first song starts with a slow, atmospheric intro and a moody guitar and distant, reverby drums. They're building just gradually, He waits and 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and his mind is already wandering back to the dark road ahead of him and the blinking taillights in the car right there and the text that he still hasn't answered from earlier, The song is probably going to be good eventually, but right now it just feels like it's asking him to invest all this limited attention with no payoff in immediate sight. So he swipes and skips it, and the next song, same thing happens, already another long setup, and his attention is already slipping back to the highway, and then Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple kicks in. The moment that legendary 4-note guitar riff explodes in the first few seconds, everything changes, His eyes snap back to the road and his shoulders kind of straighten up, and he cranks the volume without thinking, lets out this low hell yeah, And the hook didn't ask for his attention. It just grabbed it instantly, like a bright flare lighting up the dark highway. And for the next 4 minutes, he's fully locked in. His foot is tapping on the pedal. He's singing along at the top of his lungs. He's wide awake, and he's actually enjoying his drive. Nothing about the truck or the night changed. The only difference is that immediate musical payoff. And here's why that instant hook matters so much in your brain. In today's world, your attention is constantly being pulled like in 1,000 directions. You have notifications, and traffic fatigue, and worries, and all this stuff. And your brain has a lightning fast gatekeeper system that sizes up anything new in just a few microseconds. And it asks like, is this worth my limited focus right now? And if the answer is no, it just checks out and it moves on to the next thing. And a song that waits too long to get good kind of feels like wasting that precious attention budget, really. But when the catchiest part slams in immediately in the iconic riff and Smoke on the Water, the brain gets this instant like, this is good signal. And it releases a quick hit of reward saying, yes, I keep going. And it commits to the full song before the distractions can pull you away. It's the musical version of a friend walking up, telling you the best part of the story right at the beginning instead of making you wait through 10 minutes of setup. You're hooked before you even realize it. I've also noticed that a lot of YouTubers do this in their videos, feed you a hook right away, get into their routine afterwards. And of course, I'm not really a pro at this, so there's no hook in my intro. Okay, Free Fallin' by Tom Petty perfectly describes my 7th and final hack, which is simple stepwise melodies. I mean, the vocal melody is built on these easy, small interval steps. It's a gentle rising and falling contour, and it requires super low cognitive load, and it's ridiculously hummable, if that's a word. Okay, now meet Sarah, a 40-year-old barista who works an early shift in a busy downtown coffee shop. All right. By 10 a.m., her brain already feels like it's been through a blender with constant orders, screaming milk frothers, impatient customers, and the never-ending chatter of the morning rush. And during her short break, she steps out into the alley behind the shop and leans against the brick wall and puts in her earbuds. And she hits shuffle, hoping for something to quiet that mental noise. The first song that comes on is like a flashy modern indie track with a complicated zigzagging melody. I mean, there's notes leaping all over the scale like a caffeinated squirrel on a power line. She tries to follow it, but her exhausted mind just keeps losing the thread. And the melody feels busy and demanding, like it's asking her to solve a puzzle when she's already running on empty. After 30 seconds, she just sighs and skips it and stares blankly at the dumpster on the other side of the alley. And then, Free Fallin' by Tom Petty drifts into her earbuds, and the melody starts super simple and gentle with these small, easy steps that rise and fall like a slow, relaxed Sunday morning drive with the windows down. And there's no wild jumps. There's no mental gymnastics. The notes feel like they're walking beside her instead of racing ahead or yanking her around like a dog on a leash, And within seconds, her shoulders drop, her breathing slows, and without even realizing it, she starts softly humming along, Her head tilting back against the cool brick wall, and for the first time that day, her overworked brain gets to coast instead of sprint. And the melody feels soothing, almost like a friend just saying like, it's okay, I've got you, just walk with me. And by the time her break ends and she heads back inside, she's still humming the chorus perfectly under her breath. And the complicated indie song, well, it's completely forgotten. And here's why your brain actually loves these simple stepwise melodies. And trust me, it's not just you being lazy. Your brain's like an overworked parent trying to manage a super chaotic household. It has a limited amount of energy every single day, and it's constantly juggling hundreds of sounds and worries and tasks. And when a melody moves in small natural steps that are smooth and kind of predictable, like walking along this flat, well-paved sidewalk, well, it barely requires any extra effort to follow it. And that ease feels wonderful to your brain. It registers like quiet pleasure, like a gentle sigh of relief. And so that's not laziness. It's really smart energy management more than anything. The brain rewards simplicity because easy to process music lets it relax and enjoy the moment and remember the tune effortlessly, and still have energy left for the rest of life. Complicated, jumping melodies force the brain to work super hard just to keep up with it, and that can feel like really tiring and annoying after a long day. So, simple stepwise ones let the brain glide along and turn the song into something that feels natural and it sticks in your head, and it feels good to hum or to sing. So when you hear free falling, your brain isn't taking the easy way out, it's really choosing a smooth path so that you can actually enjoy the ride instead of fighting to stay on it. All right, before we finish, I want to have some fun. I want to show you one classic rock song that actually combines all 7 of these psychological hacks so effectively that it feels addictive almost 45 years later. The song is Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne. And if you can, throw it on right now and listen to the first 60 or 90 seconds while I break it down. All right, you got it? So first, dopamine engineering through anticipation and release, right? That tense palm-muted riff builds pressure right from the start, and then the full band explodes onto the chorus with Ozzy's soaring vocals, Your brain gets the climb, and then the massive satisfying drop, pure dopamine fuel. Second, you have strategic repetition, which I call the mere exposure effect. The main riff and that catchy Crazy Train vocal hook repeat immediately and often. Just a couple of listens and it's already stuck in your head and it feels impossible to shake. And then third, you have prediction reward, which is guessing correctly. And so once you hear that tight verse chorus structure, your brain quickly learns the pattern, and every time the chorus hits exactly like you expected it to, you get that satisfying, like, yes, I called it feeling. And fourth, balanced predictability and surprise. Well, this song has a solid, driving, heavy rock groove that you can just lock into, but Randy Rhoads also throws in kind of flashy guitar runs and some high-pitched screams and unexpected solo licks, and that keeps it exciting and fresh. Fifth, we have emotional resonance and narrative. The lyrics tap into that chaotic, out-of-control feeling, mental madness, society losing its mind and trying to hang on. A lot of us have had days or years that feel exactly like riding a crazy train, so this song does hit on a personal level. Sixth, we have instant hook placement. That legendary riff and Ozzy's all aboard shout grab you in the first 5 to 8 seconds, There's no long intro that asks you to wait, and the hook hits hard and fast, and it pulls you in before your attention can wander. And seventh, simple stepwise melodies, right? Ozzy's vocal lines, especially in the chorus, move in smooth, natural steps that are just ridiculously easy to sing along to, Your brain doesn't have to work that hard. It just flows with the melody and it just wants to keep coming back. When you stack all 7 of these hacks together like Ozzy and Randy Rhoads did here, you don't just get a good song. You actually get a rock anthem that still lights up arenas and gyms and playlists even decades later. So the next time that you're writing music, remember this. Combine anticipation and release and repetition prediction, balance, emotion, instant hooks, and simple melodies, and you're speaking straight into the ancient wiring in every single listener's brain at that point. Now, go make something that people can't stop playing. I'm Kevin from Innovaniac Music. We help indie artists produce great music and build their audience. Until the next video, dream big and create boldly.
100 miles per hour on that see-through. All I ever had is to be true. More like Swiss cheese when I approach these words. They got holes in them, so deep you can fill them up and swim in them. Not advisable, I would try it though. Walk with a cane on a rainy day. Big teeth out, that's a smiley face. Lights on, lights off, I'ma make it happen. Wax on, wax off.